the $9.99 or whatever it is, and how much you get for $9.99 compared to, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, before there were any kind of networks, you're paying $15 a show.
Yeah.
So if you're, when you were buying the Evolve shows back in the day, it was $15 a show. It was $19.99 a show. Now you're spending $10 and you're getting just a plethora of content. If you have it, fork it over to those, less in need right now, or more in need right now, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned ECW, and I saw a post you put up. It said you and Joel Gertner, and you referenced him as your coach in your first ECW endeavor. What did you do with ECW, and what did Joel Gertner do with you?
So I ended up ring announcing for them from November of '96 till January of '99 for all their New England shows. My first show was just featured on Dark Side of the Ring last week.
The mass transit incident.
My very first booking. So it's funny because I love that you guys hit me up, just asking me to be a guest on the podcast. So many people, like, after that came out, oh, can you come on our podcast and talk about that? I'm like, what else is there to really say other than my perspective? You've already had, the whole story, and there were some holes in that theory of everything that happened that night. But yeah, that was my first ECW booking. So I knew Gertner just before social media, just talking on the phone or whatever. He was just starting out, and he was looking to get some announcing gigs up here and stuff. And he used to actually go under the name Joey Jaguar. I'll never forget it. Excuse me. So I broke in with a guy named the Boston Bad Boy, Tony Rumble. Yeah. So he's the one that broke me in. And I remember he called me and goes, "Hey, Palladino, somebody's trying to take your job." And it was Joel Gertner. And he was like, "Hey, I do ring announcing, blah, 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 if you ever have any openings." And he and I didn't know each other. Fast forward a few years, I start ring announcing for ECW, and we finally get to connect and work together. He was my coach because at that point, late '96, he was not ring announcing. He was the heel mouthpiece for the Dudleys.
Yeah.
So actually, at that point, I think he was with Devon. I think Bubba was still a babyface at that point, but he was not ring announcing. So when I had my first gig, he coached me and just basically would help me with the hometowns away, so I didn't have to go around because he knew them all. He would, and they do their introductions boxing style. So he was kind of walking me through how to do that. And then I'll never forget, and it's funny saying this now, considering everything that happened. Oh yeah, and when the gangsters come out, you'll be in the ring, but as soon as they come out, just get the hell out, because the New Jack's going to throw the barrel in the ring, and you don't want to be in the way. Just so that's what I meant by him being my coach, and we've been pretty decent friends all this time. So I'll see him at a WrestleCon, or we have a thing up here every year, a New England Fan Fest, and he's usually part of that. So we always connect, and he's just a really, really good guy. So he really helped me on that first night. I wasn't prepared for everything else, but
sure. So, just touch on the mass transit incident. Then I had no idea that was your first night. So you see that happen. You see the gusher of blood in the ring. That's a practice. What I think a lot of people don't understand is it sounds crazy in 2020 to say guys would, not going too much in detail, but help other guys with what they don't want to do in the ring. And that was commonplace, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I guess I don't, maybe New Jack went a little bit too deep. Maybe he was a little, whatever happened. But was it as crazy backstage and everything going on as they made it seem?
Yeah. And so everything you saw on the TV show, I saw. So I was probably closest to the ring when the kid's father was yelling, "Ring the effing bell." He's 17. He was talking directly to me. And I was not ringing that bell unless your last name is Heyman and you tell me to ring the bell. I was not. And I remember it was bad. And I'd never seen that much blood. And I did run to the back. And Heyman and one of the local promoters that had booked me, this guy, Paul Richard, who used to be a referee for them, I just said, I think we have a potential problem out there. I said, there's a lot of blood out there. And I said, I have a towel in my bag. Do you want me to grab it? No, just get back out there. And thank God I did. Because right when I got back out there, New Jack's like, "Give me the fucking microphone." And just handed it to him right away.
Sure. Absolutely.
So when he cut that promo saying, "I don't care if this fat mother effer bleeds to death because I don't give a F," I literally just handed him that microphone, and then It was crazy. But I was in the back when the kid's father was trying to get back there and saying, I'll kill you, you effing N. And I mean, that was legit. It was it was crazy. It was scary. And I was just like, what the hell have I got myself into?
Did you rethink your relationship with ECW at that point, or were you like, this is awesome?
I was such a mark for no, I was definitely not. This is awesome. I was such a mark for the product. Like I used to get the tapes because I mean we didn't even have the TV show. We had just got the TV show up here, but I remember I used to get all the tapes and I used to fucking love it. Couldn't believe that I was actually going to be ring announcing, and then all that happened. So I went from beginning of the night getting there. I had a comp ticket. And Paul Richards said, do you have your tux with you? And I said, of course. And he goes, go get it. You're ring announcing. I was like, holy shit. Because I had just been to their show the night before in Webster. And it was more of a TV taping that night. And Joey Styles was actually there. And he was actually doing the ring announcing and whatnot. But I was there watching. Then the next night to be asked to ring announce. And I was ecstatic. And I'll never forget, you talk about the highs and the lows. I started my night going through that curtain to the locker room and seeing three people all standing around talking to each other. Tammy, Beulah, and Francine. Those are the first three faces I saw when I walked in that locker room. And then to go to the end of the night, or halfway through the show when all that chaos was going down, and I just never forget, Heyman called me over. He's like, where's my ring announcer? And I went over and he said, what's your name, kid? And shook hands. And he goes, what do I owe you? And I was like, man, I make $25 a night. Don't, whatever. He goes, not here, you don't. And he wrote me a check for more than $25, which was nice. And I legitimately looked at him and said, I'm honored to be here, but, can you make sure like nothing like that ever happens to me? And he said, as long as you work here, don't worry, you'll always be safe, blah, blah, blah. I'll never forget that. But I was so uneasy after that. And New Jack obviously wasn't on the next several shows until that court case was all said and done. But that kind of helped give me a little bit of name value, though, just working for ECW. So it kind of helped my my stock on the indies around here. So, but what a crazy, crazy time.
Man, that's the definition of trial by fire. But I mean, 1996, you're walking into, what'd you say, Francine, Beulah, and Tammy.
Yeah,
that's the 1996 Mount Rushmore right there.
Yeah,
that's the who's who.
Yeah,
you can't focus on a show at that point. It's like, well, I'm here now. I've made it. So
first thing I wanted to do too is like, oh my god, I'd love to get a picture with those three, but I didn't want to. I was just there to do my job. I didn't want to totally mark out. I wish I had. I really wish I had marked out more during those days, but it was just such a rush just working there. It was incredible.
So the name value of ECW, like you said, helped you on the indies. Where did you focus on, before you got to be on wrestling, after ECW, where did you spend a lot of your time?
So I had started with a company called Century Wrestling Alliance that Tony Rumble had run. I started with him in 93. I started in ECW in 96. I was there till early 99, and then Tony Rumble passed away suddenly November of 1999. And I thought that was it. I thought that was my career was over because I'd pretty much worked for him and then just some smaller indies here and there as they popped up just because of my name value for whatever that's worth. But then when NWA New England, so Century Wrestling Alliance had bought into the NWA. So we were part of the National Wrestling Alliance. And then Tony passed away and we didn't know what was going to happen with the company. And I thought that was it. Fortunately, like a year later, Chaotic Wrestling started. And I should say Chaotic Wrestling and everybody else that wanted to be a wrestling promoter all of a sudden became a wrestling promoter. So I started with Chaotic in 2000. They're still here today. Yeah. Brian Fury has bought, the promotion, and he runs the school. He owns the promotion. And so that's been my home for 20-something years. I just did random indies here and there. There's a few other companies that I've worked for. And then Beyond started in a garage in Ohio.
Yeah.
In 2008 or 2009, when they did their first show in Providence, I kind of worked my way onto the show through Biff Busick. And I had met Denver, Colorado, the man, not the place. I'd met him at WrestleCon in New Jersey, but I never worked for him. And then when they did their first big show, American Rana 13, I just hit up Biff and I'm like, all right, you guys have been running shows out of Brian Fury's school. What is this Fet Music all about? He's like, it's our first really big show. I said, well, do you have an announcer? He's like, not really. So he talked to Drew, and Biff gets back and he goes, well, he can use you, but he doesn't have much of a budget. I said, I don't care. Whatever. He will after this one show. And sure enough, so that was it. So that's kind of given me a lot of name value too. So it's like I've been the guy with Chaotic for 20 something years. And now as Beyond gains more mainstream notoriety, I've gained some notoriety, I guess. So right place, right time. I just sold myself. I didn't care about making money. I just wanted to be on that show. And it was
right place, right time. But, as a fan, you do that for your fandom. Like you said, you're very lucky to have the full-time life, and this is extra money on the side. So for you to put that time in when you don't necessarily have to, you want to, right place, right time is one thing, but also a commitment to something you love is, I think, kind of what gets your foot in the door. And Beyond Wrestling, definitely, you are the voice of Beyond Wrestling. I'm not saying that to put you up because you're on the show. You absolutely are.
Thank you.
And then independentwrestling.tv, came along, and especially Uncharted Territory. For Beyond Wrestling, I think Uncharted Territory is such a crucial, part of who they're becoming, because they're delivering very, very good wrestling week to week to week, and they're building their own stars. A lot of these companies, they try to build their own stars, but maybe they don't have the widespread availability that like an Uncharted Territory does. So why is Beyond Wrestling so good at that? Why are they so good at making names or helping people along? Like you said, Chris Dickinson, Chris Statlander, Kimberly, Josh Briggs, just to name a few people. How are they so good at that? Or they just have a good eye for talent?
Good eye for talent, and just giving the fans what they want. I think the biggest thing with Beyond is it's not a New England indie. And that's what separated it from everybody else, because everybody else just used talent in this area, would bring in a name here and there, depending on, what the money situation was like, if it was a fundraiser or whatever. But Drew has just had an amazing eye for talent. And like I said, not making it just a New England indie. There's all these guys from other parts of the country. I mean, flying guys in, banking on these indie names drawing, which they certainly have. So I mean, that's the biggest thing. Plus, you're getting like indie fans. I think there are fans out here that I say this, and I've said it publicly before. The Chaotic Wrestling fans, they know Chaotic Wrestling and WWE. Now maybe AEW. That's all they know. Whereas the Beyond fan knows independent wrestling. So they see like all these different guys, like the guys and girls that you had just mentioned, and they're like, oh my God, they're going to be in Providence, they're going to be in Worcester, they're going to be in Boston, wherever. Oh, I'm going to go. And I think it just took off and completely exploded from there, because it went from the guys that were wrestling in a garage and in a wrestling school with no fans to that first American Rana in front of a crowd, and it just took off from there. And when you got guys like Kevin Steen and the Young Bucks and Chris Hero and all these huge guys that had done bigger things elsewhere, and now they're right there in your backyard, how can you not get fully invested in that? So very lucky. And Drew had just posted something. April 3rd was the 1-year anniversary of the first Uncharted Territory, and he had pictures of Janela and Chris Statlander and SCU and Jordan Grace and John Gresham and all these people. And now look at them. They're in AEW, they're in Ring of Honor, they're in Impact, so he's just just always had a great eye for talent, and the proof's in the pudding now.
And knows how to book the match. I remember one of my favorite matches from Beyond was, I think it was the Bucks and Kevin Steen versus Team Tremendous and somebody. And it is just like, that the atmosphere there too, that's what is so different from, because the fans are right up on the ring, and that's, you don't see that. Beyond Wrestling is actually the first place where I saw that. Okay. I know there are plenty of other places that have done it, but Beyond Wrestling is the first place where I saw the fans actually standing with their hands on the ring. Was that worrisome in the beginning? I feel like, because insurance wise, is that an issue? Do you think?
At the beginning, I felt more like it was, but I think because it's such a controlled, I think the fans are just so respectful and they get it. It's like, and we always tell them, especially if Nick Gage is coming out, stand back a little bit when his match starts. I always say, usually before we go live, if a wrestler's coming your way, get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah, sure.
If you see a wrestler coming towards you, I'm like, don't be sitting here on your phone, because you will get kicked in the face. Because it happened once in Providence. Somebody was like, wrong place, wrong time. They weren't really doing anything. They just weren't paying attention.